Hello again, racing fans. Welcome to Hoosier Park Racing and Casino for this Thursday night of racing action here at Hoosier Park. This is Behind the Lines, and I'm Steve Cross with our special guest tonight, Hall of Fame driver, Mr. Dave McGee. Dave, good to have you back on the air.
Well, thanks a lot, Steve. It's good to be here.
Mr. McGee, of course, and now one of the new faces in the judges' stand here at Hoosier Park, and we are certainly very honored to have you here. I would have to say Hoosier Park and the state of Indiana are very lucky to have you on board. This is your first stint as a judge.
Well, it is, and I'm not sure how the state feels about it, but I feel very fortunate to be here myself. So I'm grateful for the opportunity, and I'm really enjoying it so far.
Good, very good. Well, that's certainly good to hear at this point. Well, we have each and every night here on Behind the Lines, we give our racing fans an opportunity to ask questions of our guests, and we have some Twitter questions here, some very good questions that have been tweeted our way. So we're going to dive right into these things and let you answer them if you would.
Sure.
First of all, from Miles Linderman, Mr. McGee, what has been the most difficult part about transitioning from being a Hall of Fame driver to a judge here at Hoosier Park?
Well, frankly, it hasn't been as difficult as I thought it might be. Simply because I started way before the meet started, actually, and they had a great orientation through the state, and I've worked with some great people, and the judges that I'm associated with here, Mike Hall and Kevin Gum, have plenty of experience, and they're willing to teach me, and they've been extremely helpful.
Well, I've got to be honest with you, Dave. I think that your two companions upstairs certainly are two of the best teachers that anyone could have. I think we here at Hoosier Park, we have, with you three in the judges' stand, I think we are going to have one of the best judges' stands in the country, and it's good to know that we're in good hands.
Well, I hope so. I mean, we have varying degrees of experience and expertise.
Right.
Mike, of course, is experienced in all facets of the industry, as well as judging, of course, and he's just great. And Kevin Gum is also very great. He's been around and been to a lot of places and really knows a lot about judging.
And one thing with Kevin as well, he also has experience on the thoroughbred side.
Well, that's true. He, like I say, he has a diverse background for his age, and I learn a lot from both of them.
Well, and it's always good, obviously, to have a driver's perspective in the judges' stand, and nowhere else can anyone say that they have a Hall of Famer in their judges' stand. So again, we are very fortunate here in the state of Indiana. From Jeremy Day, here's a question. This is a good question. How do prior relationships with trainers factor into judging calls that could go either way?
Well, that is a good question, and I've thought about it a lot even prior to becoming a judge because, obviously over the years I've developed a lot of relationships.
Sure.
And, the rules are cut and dried pretty much, and I just feel like if someone does something wrong, there are consequences.
Sure.
I don't really put relationships as a factor into it, and it's not it's not a sole decision.
Right.
It's a team decision. We all have our own opinions, and very often, most of the time, we're on the same page.
Sure.
And the thing I like about it is Mike Hall, who's the presiding judge, really respects the opinions of both Kevin and I, and we factor everything in and come up with a unanimous decision. So really the relationships don't factor in at all for me. I mean, I love my kids too, but when they do something wrong, they have to be disciplined. I mean, that's just how it goes. And it's not exactly the same with judging, but it's on the same principle. Really.
But again, that's what makes a very strong judge's stand is when each official is given the opportunity to voice his opinion, and there may be times when it'll be 2 against 1, perhaps, where you might be the dissenting vote, but nevertheless, you're given the opportunity to voice your opinion, and that obviously has to obviously you have to respect each other to do that, and that's how a great decision, a sound decision, is made when there's more than one person that is making the call.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I've really appreciated that about Mike. He solicits our opinions on
Right.
each and every race, and doesn't make a final official call until he has heard from both of us. So,
Great.
I really appreciate that respect, because sometimes I do have an opinion that maybe is more related to my driving experience.
Sure, okay. Well, here's a question from one of our own, Tom Dubrick. Do you see a need to crack down on drivers not driving to the wire, or to stay in condition?
Well, Indiana is all about integrity. If you're not driving a horse to the wire, you're not giving it best effort, and of course that's of utmost concern.
Sure.
I mean, it may appear that sometimes that a horse isn't given its best effort, or a driver, but a lot of times there's circumstances around it. But we question everything and follow up on it as well. So, it's a big concern of ours that people do try to the wire.
Sure. So, if you see a driver that perhaps you think may be questionable as far as driving through the wire, obviously you're going to get on the phone back to the paddock, and you're going to call them on the carpet and ask questions, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, Mike is very good about communicating with the horsemen,
Right.
and they know where he stands, and he doesn't keep anything under his shirt. He's out there with his opinions, and
very
questioning.
transparent.
Yeah, he questions the guys and lets them know that we're aware of what's going on.
Okay, so that's obviously the way it needs to be. Jacob Hall with a question that mirrors Miles Linderman's question earlier. What has come to be as the biggest surprise to you since transitioning into the judges' stand? Anything that surprises you that you weren't expecting?
Well, a few things, really. The first thing, most of all, was I was a little apprehensive about it, because you think of it as the other side when you're a horseman, and I was a little tentative in that regard. But the people I've worked with have made the transition absolutely awesome. I can't say enough about the people from the commission all the way to the horsemen have been really good about it, and that's made my transition fairly fluid.
Okay, very good. Here's a tricky question for you. Raymond Lance asks, can a horse be declared a non-starter for broken equipment and still be put on the list to qualify? Sounds like Raymond may have some experience with this here. What's your opinion on that?
Well, a horse certainly can be declared a non-starter for broken equipment if it happens before the start and the starter doesn't catch it. A lot of times it is difficult to catch that when they're, right before the start. And yes, a horse can be placed on the list for various reasons, not necessarily for the broken equipment, but it would be perhaps erratic behavior of that horse prior to the broken equipment or even after.
Okay.
So the two aren't necessarily related, but yes.
Can happen.
Yes to both questions.
Okay, very good. On the racing side here, Pompano Park Racing has a question. What are your most memorable wins? And was the Isle of Capri win with He Wants It All one of those memorable victories?
Well, there have been so many, and that does bring back a great memory. That was awesome, actually. I went there. I go into every race actually thinking I can win it, but when it comes to fruition, it really is special, and that was one of those cases.
You remember offhand what year that would have been? Going to put you on the spot here, Dave.
Well, I can tell you for sure that I do not.
Very good. Well, I know it wasn't when I was there. I was there in 98 and 99, and I don't recall seeing you there. So
Yeah.
It certainly wasn't one of those 2 years. Now, here is a question from a young man that you have driven against on many occasions in the past. In my opinion, a future Hall of Famer as well, like yourself. This question coming in from none other than Tim Tetrick. Dave, who was your mentor in harness racing industry before and during your career?
Well, that's a great question. Actually, before I started driving, my mentor was my Uncle Elwood. As many people know, I started out on the county fairs in Wisconsin and always
Really?
Yeah, always looked up to my uncle. He was kind of a celebrity at the county fairs up there because he raced in Chicago and would come home on the weekends for the fairs.
Sure.
And he was a man of great character and just always respected him. So I got my roots there, and of course my grandfather as well. And once I got into driving, I always looked up to Walter Paisley.
Ah.
And I thought he set a great example for competitiveness and fieriness, and just a great guy, and I always respected him.
Well, that's certainly interesting to know. And obviously, there have been many up-and-coming young drivers that have looked up to you as well as their mentor and their hero. And obviously, you have set a great example as well with integrity, with your driving ability. And personality-wise, Dave, you're always a great joy to have at any racetrack. I can recall back in, I'm going to say the mid-'90s, mid to late '90s, you came to Scioto Downs when I was at Scioto Downs for a driving championship. Actually, it was the World Driving Championship, and leads me into my next question. What are some of those highlights? What year was that specifically?
Well, I believe it was 96
Okay.
or 98, but dates I'm not really good at, but obviously. But the memories were very special. I made some great acquaintances and great friendships with some of the foreign drivers, and the highlights were really quite a few because I did end up winning that competition. Right. I specifically the most memorable time was at Delaware during Jug Week when I won that race, and my wife was able to be there, and there was a lot of fanfare. And,
sure.
And I'll tell you, anytime you get on that podium and hear your national anthem, it chokes you up.
Sure.
You're representing your country, and I took a lot of pride in that, and it was a very special time.
Certainly is, and that's obviously a big feather in anyone's hat when you can win that competition because, yes, you are taking on the very best in the world. And so congratulations to that, incidentally.
Yeah, thanks.
Some of the questions here that we have for you, you've been Chicago-based. You're most of your career based in the Midwest. You had some East Coast opportunities. In fact, if memory serves me correctly, you did go to the East Coast for a short stint. What brought you back home to Chicago?
Well, I grew up on a farm in Wisconsin, and I'm just a Midwesterner, but,
Not just a Midwesterner, you're a Midwesterner.
Yeah, absolutely. But I went out there to test the waters, and
sure.
I loved racing out there, quite frankly, but when I was away from the track, I didn't feel like it was a great family lifestyle for
sure.
me, so I just decided that I would make Chicago area my home.
You're obviously a big family man, and your family was with you on closing night at Balmoral Park, and actually I shouldn't say closing night, but your final night of racing. As you can see here, quite a few members in your family, Dave. That's rather a large contingency to follow you to Balmoral Park. How many children?
Well, I have 6 kids, and
no kidding.
Yeah, and they're all awesome. And 2 of the older ones are married, and I have 3 grandchildren and 1 on the way. My 2 granddaughters are holding the sign there in that photo. But those are all my immediate family. My wife is next to me, and just a beautiful family, if I do say
certainly
so
is.
myself.
Certainly is something to be very proud of, Dave. How does that work then in your driving profession when you were probably most any night you were on the road somewhere going to drive somewhere, if not in Chicago, on a flight going elsewhere to drive in big stakes events? Did the wife, other than Delaware during the driving championship, was she able to travel with you?
Not frequently, because, with a large family, there's responsibilities at home, and we never left our kids behind very often. And so Kathy was always at home, and she sacrificed a lot
sure.
for me to pursue my career. And so did my kids, really. We didn't take a lot of vacations. I mean, our vacation was a working vacation at the Springfield at the State Fair every year.
That's not all bad.
And they really look forward to it, and still do, actually. But Yeah, my family made sacrifices so that I could pursue my career, and you know, they get a lot of credit actually because, especially my wife, because she made it possible for
Sure.
me to keep my head on straight and
Mhm.
think about my work without worrying about the sacrifices that she was making.
That's one thing with horse racing. It is, for the most part, it is a big family ordeal, and that does require a lot of sacrifices. And when you have those family members at your back, backing you all the way, obviously, it can make obviously make for a very successful racing career such as your own. You've had the opportunity to drive countless champion horses. Any one horse that stands out?
Well, probably one of the best horses I raced that I raced consistently throughout a season or two was Mr. Dalray. And
yes.
you know, I drove a lot of great horses, obviously, and they were a lot of them were, you know, world champions. But the thing that was special about him is I got to travel with him week after week to all across the country and
Okay.
Canada, and you know, race against on the road again and horses of that caliber, and you know, it was just a special time.
Sure, absolutely.
So he stands out, but one of my favorite all-time horses was just a little homebred that won the Orange and Blue actually in her second lifetime start. So
Really? Second lifetime start?
yeah, she wasn't any higher than this table, and she was just a little peanut, but she had a heart bigger than a house. So
Right.
she was special.
Okay, very good. Also, driving those different horses, any one particular race, other than maybe that Orange and Blue, any one particular race that really stands out, maybe a big surprise or obviously a huge accomplishment, something that you really thought, okay, I've arrived?
Well, no, I've never really been really high on myself. You know, I always felt like I still had plenty to learn, even before I retired. I just, but probably one of the most memorable races was Annie Crombie winning
Yes,
the
good
Breeders'
mare.
Crown at the Meadowlands.
Okay.
That was a special night, and again, my wife was able to be there, so you know, it was a special night.
Sure, absolutely. So, obviously, Annie Crombie, I remember watching her race in Chicago, very, very good race mare in her day. Now, one race that stands out in my mind, I had the opportunity to race a horse back in 1994. My mother and I owned, and we were honored to have Mr. Dave McGee drive this horse for us. His name was Studebaker. And lo and behold, he was a winner at Maywood Park on a very, very cold night. In the winner's circle there, he wins in 57 and change. I'm sure you don't remember this at all, Dave, but that's something I'll never forget. I was in cloud nine because I had Mr. McGee that agreed to drive my horse. I'm one of the fortunate ones that was able to have you drive our horse. When you were driving and named on multiple horses each and every night, how did you determine which horse you were going to drive? Is there a lot of loyalty, or is it all business?
Well, actually, I took a lot of things into consideration. If it was even on the relationship side, in other words, I have the same relationship with both trainers, both owners, I would probably choose the better horse. But a lot of times I had people that were special to me that I tried to cater to,
Sure.
whether it be a trainer or an owner. And but for the most part, you try to figure out your best opportunities and go in that direction.
Sure, absolutely. As a driver, a pet peeve as a driver when you were on the track. Is there a pet peeve that you would like to see addressed now that you're, as you said earlier, on the other side, now that you're in the judges' stand? Something that just got under your skin when you're a driver that seems like those nasty, mean judges never addressed, and that now that you are one of those nasty, mean, no, I'm just kidding, one of those judges in the judges' stands, is there something in particular that, if you'd have the chance, so this is something I would like to see?
Well, a lot of it has been addressed here at Indiana at Hoosier Park. You know, this is a very, very progressive state as far as controlling the medications, and the rules are, you know, out there in the forefront. I like the whipping rules here. I think, you know, that is one of my pet peeves anymore. It didn't used to be, but
Right.
after experiencing both ways, I really prefer the controlled whipping.
Sure.
And it really makes me cringe when I see you guys, you know, going hard with the whip.
Absolutely.
And another one is probably slow quarters. They tend to bother me because, frankly, you might make a great decision at the start of a race. Everybody's busting out of there, and you make the right decision and take back, and then all of a sudden the pace comes back to you dramatically.
Get
that
you
makes it
jammed up.
really difficult. So.
But don't you have a right line?
Yes, but a lot of times if you're in the back, you may pull at just past the 8th pull, and everybody slips out in front of you and holds up the pace, and it just kills your opportunity.
Sure, sure. So the one of the biggest things I see in harness racing, maybe not so much in the thoroughbred racing. There's obviously, and again, I'm a harness man, so sometimes a thoroughbred racing may seem a little foreign to me, but strategy. Obviously, the first eighth of a mile, get yourself in position to be in position. And here at Hoosier Park, we have a long quarter-mile stretch, which at Balmoral Park, you had the longest stretch in the industry. So does that, you know, with those long stretches, is that something that you took into consideration when you were driving, say, versus at Maywood Park? Does your strategy change going from one size track to the other?
Oh, certainly on a small track, you know, it's advantageous to be up close, but
Right.
On a big track, pace and position are key. You know, if it's a slow pace, it doesn't matter how long the stretch is because the horses are still fresh on the front if they're,
Right.
you know, coming off a slow pace. So you're not
Sure.
a horse can only go so fast, but yeah, you take all those things into consideration. I mean, I used to spend hours thinking about the possible scenarios for every situation that might occur, and then
Then the gate folded and everything changed.
Well, no, not necessarily. Hopefully, you have one of those options pre-planned, but it's you know, you have to kind of feel your way around out there, but the
Sure.
start of the race is key to driving, in my opinion. And people would always ask me, what do you think your chances are? Well, I was a very poor handicapper because I thought I could win every race. But, you know, I never really thought about the finish that much. My race was planned mostly at the start,
Right.
and then, you know, all the way up to the 3/4, and
Right.
after that, you know, things happened.
Right. Get in position to be in position.
Right.
Scariest moment.
Well, that happened not that long ago.
Really?
We were racing at Balmoral Park, and it was a stacked-up field of trotters. We were coming around the last turn, and just before we came out of the turn, the lights completely went out. In the grandstand, everywhere it was black. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face.
Wow.
And I just grabbed hard, but the horse in front of me apparently stopped, and my horse went over top, and we all ended up in a heap. And you know, I was crumpled up on the ground, and I looked up, and I could see the silhouette of a horse coming down towards me, and he actually landed across the arch of my bike and was still there when the starting car pulled up with his lights, and that
Wow.
was the most scary because you feel totally out of control.
Wow.
And, you know, as long as you have some control, you feel like,
Sure.
you know, you have a chance. But
Sure.
that was kind of scary.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Trotters or pacers?
That was
Preference.
trotters. Oh,
Your preference.
my preference is trotters.
Trotters.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a beautiful gait.
It is.
Takes. I grew up around trotters. My grandfather specialized in trotters.
Okay.
As well as my uncle, and
You might remember last week, don't know what race it was. It was one of the late closers, two trotting fillies hooked up at the top of the stretch and dueled the entire stretch. Nothing more beautiful than seeing especially two young fillies going at it head to head, nose to nose. Neither made a made a boo-boo, and I mean, they came right down to the wire, and it was a neck that separated them at the wire.
Yeah.
Beautiful sight.
Yeah. As judges, sometimes you don't like trots as much because there's more opportunity for horses to break.
Sure.
But I really appreciate them, and when you see a nice young field of trotters going around there and staying on stride and trying their hearts out, there's nothing better.
A lot of county fairs in the Midwest. Once you had yourself established and in Chicago, did you do much driving on the county fairs?
No, not really. A couple of seasons, but just sporadically, and not really. I was actually working in Chicago at the time for my uncle as a groom, so I couldn't really get away. And
Okay.
went. Once I got my qualifying license, I went on my own and.
Did you train at that time? Train any of your own?
Well, I started out, with a small stable,
Okay.
leasing a couple of horses, and had some success, and eventually built a stable that was
Really?
competitive enough to, after bouncing around to many of the bush tracks,
Mhm.
that was competitive enough to make it on the Chicago circuit, and then I took my stable to Chicago.
Okay, so now you've been on now you've been to three facets of harness racing as the trainer on the trainer's side, the driver, now the judge's side. What advice would you give to aspiring young drivers that are coming up that would like to get into the business?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, character is key.
Yes, it is.
That's everything. And from there, as far as learning the trade, I just keep an open mind, keep your ears open, and always be willing to learn and learn from the best.
Good answer. Along the same lines, then, what advice would you give to trainers?
Well, there again, integrity is key. You really tarnish your reputation by one bad decision, and
Right.
I think that's what people like about Indiana is they consider it a pretty level playing field because it is closely adjudicated. But I've been out of training for so long. I'm not really a good advisor for trainers,
But you wouldn't hesitate to, when we come off the track, you might make a suggestion to the trainer, a different bit, lengthen his hobbles, shorten his hobbles.
Yeah, well, it was a lot easier years ago because trainers stuck with the driver, but
Okay.
these days, you're up one day, down the next.
Right,
and
right.
I always said this was a great business. You could get fired one day and still have a job the next. But, it's hard to give advice when they don't want to listen to you.
Absolutely.
So,
Understand.
From a trainer's perspective, I would say keep your ears open to what a driver has to say as well.
Sure. Well, Dave, it has certainly been a great opportunity to sit down and have a little time here with you. I have really looked up to you for many, many years, not only because you won with my horse, but prior to that as well. And you talked about integrity. You're a man of integrity.
I appreciate that.
And you're a very humble person, which to me speaks volumes. And you're moving on to a new facet in this industry. Any regrets at this point yet? Make that change?
No, not really. Like I said, I was very apprehensive, but it's been a very pleasant experience for me thus far, and I'm looking forward to what's ahead.
Very good. Well, Dave, we are 8 minutes now from the first. We probably should wrap this up because we both need to go to work. Wish you the best of luck, and again, it is certainly our privilege to have you here at Hoosier Park in our judges' stand.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Once again, this is Behind the Lines. We are 7 minutes now to race one here at Hoosier Park. Thanks for joining us, and we certainly hope you enjoy your night. Best of luck, everyone.